Okay, hello everybody. I would say it's lovely to see you, but I can't actually see you, which is a little bit unnerving, but I can see your names are there. So I know there are various different people who have joined me today. So so we'll get started. This is very unnerving, not being able to actually see people's faces. Normally when I speak, I like to actually feed off what the expressions of people, so I know if I'm doing all right or not. So just a couple of things before we start. First of all, I can't actually see you. So if you want to communicate with me and wave at me, you can use that. And I can see if you put your hands up and things. Yeah, thank you, Maria. You've just put your hand up so I can see you there. I can't see the chat as we're talking, but if you want to ask me a question, there is a question and answer at the bottom. So if you have a question as we go through, if you could put your questions in there rather than the chat, that's absolutely fine. And hopefully, if I manage to get through it all, I'm going to try and leave 5 minutes at the end to answer your questions. Okay, but without any further ado, shall we get started? Okay, so I should just share my screen with you. We'll go to the beginning. Okay, here we go. So my name is Lisa Stevens, and I am a language teacher. I trained many years ago as a secondary school language teacher, but for the last 15 years, I have been working in primary schools, which is really where my heart lies. I teach at 2 primary schools in the Birmingham area, one in Sutton Coldfield and one in the middle of Birmingham in Handsworth. They're both very, very different schools. And at both those schools, I teach Spanish. And as you can see, my title today is More Than Words. And you might recognise that this actually comes from a song, which the version I was going to share with you is by Westlife. I do love a bit of Westlife. And the song goes, more than words is all I have to say to make you see. And there's a line in the middle that really, really struck me. And it says, it's more than words, it's more than what you say, it's the things you do. And today, what I want to think about is the notion that learning languages is about far more than words and grammar. It's about more than lists of words and grammar. And I'm really coming at this as a teacher, but also as a mother. And I'm going to start there today. So I'm going to start by talking about my children. I have 2 wonderful boys. They are absolutely gorgeous. And they both did languages at primary school. Neither of them had a particularly intense experience of learning languages at primary school, but they've both turned into linguists. My eldest is in his final year at Edinburgh University studying German and history, and the youngest has just gone to university this year and he's studying Spanish and French and German. Now, people say, oh, that's obvious, isn't it? You're a linguist. They were always going to do that. And I'm thinking, well, not necessarily, because they've never let me help them with their homework. They have really kept that part, the language part of their life, very separate from me in many ways. But I think growing up in a house surrounded by books, behind the computer, or my bookcase is full of books and etc. etc. And I guess growing up in a house that's full of those books, they have been surrounded by that kind of language. So why did they become linguists? Well, I asked them lots of questions, and I'm going to bring up some of their points they made as we come through, and they've really helped me with this. But my own experience of learning languages, I do remember words. Words are important, but I remember far more than that. I remember my first experience of learning French at primary school was translating a little book that was all about Xavier, le pauvre Xavier, who was out with his friend Nicole, and I can't remember what the other ones were called, but he fell in the water. And I do remember the one phrase I remember was "Zut alors, mon tricot," as he was his jumper, his t-shirt was absolutely soaked with water. But I do remember that, and I remember translating that, I remember positive role models in my life. I remember their enthusiasm that learning a language was different. And I really, really liked that. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So let's start with this. So words are important. Yes, learning a language is about words, and you do need to know some words to be able to communicate. Sometimes when you don't know the word, you come up with another one. So, you know, I'm forever going, oh, where's my thingamy-bob? Or where's my doofer? And, you know, I discovered that in Spanish, they you know, it's ese chisme. And somebody shared with me that in Persian, it's called the fulani, one of the teaching assistants at school. Dingsbums, other words for little tiny things. So yes, words are important. And also it's important that we have something to stick them together. So we don't just want nouns, we need the verbs, we need the adjectives, we need the grammar, we need to understand what's going on. There's no point walking around and just going nuts. What does that mean? It could mean I would like some nuts, I am nuts, I like nuts, or even more important, I am allergic to nuts, please get those nuts away from me. So we need a little bit more than just the word. Okay, and coming from my family, my Auntie Susan, love her to bits. She emigrated to Spain, and I visited her when she'd been living there for a few years. And I said, how's your Spanish coming along? And she said, oh yeah, it's okay, but I don't do verbs. I said, what do you mean you don't do verbs? And she goes, oh, I don't do verbs. So she was managing quite adequately to get along in life without putting any verbs in any sentences, because they just complicated her life. I'm not saying that's a good model for language learning, but she seemed to be doing all right. And as far as I know, she still is not a great fan of verbs. So works for her, perhaps. It does, however, take more than bricks and mortar to make a wall. Both of those walls that you can see there have got bricks, they have mortar, but they're a bit of a mess. And you need the correct mortar to stick your wall together, and you need to know how to put it together. You need those skills. It needs to match the purpose. I mean, I would say that the one on the left, there is far too much mortar there. The one on the right, there doesn't seem to be enough, and it seems to be in huge blobs in certain places. The bricks aren't lined up very well either. They're not very, very stable walls. We do need to have those skills, those grammar skills, to know about the order that words go in a sentence, to know how to form those words together. So today I'm going to whistle-stop tour, have a little think about the importance of the context, about communication, about culture, about celebration, and about the connections that we might make with language learning. Okay, here we go. So the context. I belong to a wonderful group on Facebook called the Languages in Primary School group, hence I'm wearing my Lips t-shirt. And they're a very, very helpful bunch. And sometimes people go, oh, well, how would you translate this? And one day someone was asking about translating the phrase for beans. And they translated it as judías instead of alubias. Those are alubias. If you look up in the dictionary, there are two different words for beans. It depends what kind of bean you're talking about. Judías are the green ones and alubias are those ones. So context is really quite important. They were trying to be helpful, but they'd given the person the wrong word. This little phrase in Chinese, sometimes people like to use Google Translate, and Google Translate's wonderful, but it has its limitations. And this phrase here, if you put it into Google Translate, it comes up with, the first chopsticks are the folder to whom. So that makes no sense to native English speakers. But if you understand how Google Translate works, you can see why it's come up with that strange translation. The Chinese word, if I can just point to it, this one here, I hope you can see where I'm pointing. This means folder or clip or narrow lane, according to Google Translate. So Google Translate's chosen the most common translation of that. But if you look up the word folder, if you do a Google Images search of that symbol, you'll see that it's loads of paper folders. So that's not going to be right. So how do you translate it? So you need to know that people in America, in the United Kingdom, rarely use chopsticks. So there's no good translation for this chopstick related verb. And in addition, unlike Chinese, Asian people, we very, very rarely serve other people with our own eating utensils. That doesn't seem very right. So this doesn't really exist in English. So you need to translate the overall, not the literal meaning. And when you do that, you get, when you are eating with so-and-so, whose bowl do you fill up first? So you can see the first and second examples there, they're very, very different. And it's quite important that we look at that context. Again, English is a funny language. A fat chance and a slim chance both mean the same thing. That's a little bit hard to understand. Fat and slim are antonyms, and yet they mean the same thing if you put them with the word chance. Okay, when would you use certain words? That's important, you know, knowing the context in which you can use those words. All these words here are lovely, and I know that in my class, in my Spanish class, children like to use their words. In their English classes at school, they are desperate to use adventurous vocabulary. And they will find a word and then they will try and use it in every single sentence they possibly can. I like this word cloud because there are some words in here that remind me of my mum. So we've got skinny malink, which is a Scots phrase, which is it means a skinny person, but I just think it sounds really lovely. And then over here, we've got the word scunner, which can be used as a noun for somebody that you've taken a strong dislike to, but also as a verb. I was really scunnered with him. Now, I love those words, but would I use them on a day-to-day basis? Probably not. Bilious, you know, the thought of presenting sometimes makes me feel a little bit nauseous, but would I say bilious? That kind of, to me, is more to do with being seasick. I don't know, that's just my understanding of that word. Sometimes it's choosing the correct word, and sometimes that's important, the context in which you're using it, but also the context in which you're living. So you need to make references to things that mean something to the person you're talking to. I did a Future Learn course, which I'll recommend to you later on in this presentation. And it was talking about how in translation, we need to be really careful that the images we're translating actually make sense to the person. So in a translation of the Bible, in Sumatra, instead of having the fig tree in the story of Jonah when he went and sat underneath the fig tree, they used a banana tree, because in Sumatra people wouldn't know what a fig tree was, so they had to use something that was relevant to those people. And also when you're looking at Shakespearean language, an ague, we don't use the word ague anymore for when someone's got fever. And the word bootless, if somebody's bootless in the Merchant of Venice, it doesn't mean they have no shoes, which is possibly what we'd understand nowadays, but it means that they have no purpose in life, almost like they have no direction in which to go. Okay, too much of a good thing. I know that the children at school, when I give them a task to do, they very, very much like to use all those words willy-nilly. So I get phrases sometimes when I give them some adjectives and encourage them to use it, like un supermercado grande, which is fine, a big supermarket, but then they'll add the word perezoso on the end because they like the sound of it. So you end up with a big lazy supermarket, which doesn't really make much sense, but they've just enjoyed the word. Sometimes I do allow them to write nonsense sentences just so that they can use those, just so they can use that vocabulary. But you know, you need to know the context. You need to know that in a certain context, these are the ones that you would use. Also, the words like, for example, when you're describing the speed of something, I quite often get lento and despacio in Spanish mixed up, and you know, in the context in which you would use them, they both mean slow, but in different ways. Okay. Oops, sorry. I was going to say my slides aren't moving. That's no good. So the second thing, the communication element. When I was learning languages, I was always told to think about the sympathetic native speaker. I don't know about you, but that's what I was taught to understand. But it didn't always have to be correct. As long as somebody who was in a sympathetic mood could understand what you were saying, that's what you needed to focus on. And the idea of getting the idea across. Pronunciation is important. On this slide, we have got some Spanish words, some French words, and some German words. And they are all pronounced differently, although most of them look exactly the same. So in Spanish, we have chocolate and chocolate, animal and animal, jersey and jersey. We've got fruit and fruit, elephant and éléphant. And then at the bottom, we've got chat and chat, completely different and mean completely different things. Name and name, winter and winter, and then wand and wand. I always like the one of gift as well, which has a completely different meaning. So a gift in English is something you would want to give to somebody because it's a pleasant thing. And in German, the word gift means poison. So it's quite important that we pronounce the same, but mean something completely different. So pronunciation, but also meaning are important. I love Itchy Feet comics. I don't know how many of you like them. I don't know if you want to put your hands up if you like them, just to prove you are all still there. You still awake? Yes, I've got some hands. Cool. Oh, it is nice to know there are some people there. Okay. Thank you. So Itchy Feet, I do love Itchy Feet comics. And I love this one that I saw yesterday saying, I'm looking up some I looked at the baby names on your list, and it says, Matt sounds like dead in Hebrew, Sally sounds like dirty in French, Bobby sounds like pig in Indonesian, Chloe sounds like toilet in German, and so on and so on and so on. And so you get to the end, well, great. So what can I name my baby that isn't an insult in another language? Batman. So I like comics like that. And they're the kind of things I like to bring up in class, because children are really, really, not just children, in fact. I keep saying children because I teach little people. But obviously, I am fascinated by them too. So as an adult learner, I find these things fascinating. There we are. One of the hardest things in life is having words in your heart that you cannot utter. James Earl Jones, love the man. But it's a really important point. I went to Italy on holiday a couple of years ago, and I can speak French, I can speak Spanish, I can speak Catalan, they're all Romance languages. I thought I'll be fine in Italy, it'll be okay, I'll be able to communicate. Wow, I was so frustrated. I could not communicate in the way I wanted. I did not have the words, sufficient words and sufficient mortar to put them together to be able to say exactly what I wanted. And it was really hard. I was gesturing, I was trying to think of words, I was Googling, I had my dictionary out, I was trying to make sentences together, and I did communicate, but it was so frustrating. And I find it really difficult when I can't speak to people. I tell the children at school, if in doubt, make it up. Make up a plausible version of the word. Now, it's not the best idea, but if you say things with enough confidence, sometimes you can communicate them. So quite often the children will just add an O to the end of a word in Spanish just to make it sound a bit more Spanish. Sometimes it works. I had a conversation with a lady I met at an upcycling project, and she's Spanish, and her husband thought she was absolutely wonderful at English when they first met. But she said all she was doing was she'd worked out that anything that ends with fion in Spanish would end with shun in English. Anything that ended with dath in Spanish would end with t. And she was just putting those suffixes onto words, and more often than not, she was actually hitting the jackpot, and she was getting through with it. So it is important to give it a little bit of a go and try. But then what do we do when our students, when our learners, when we make mistakes? Do we put our hand over our face and cry? What do we do? Well, mistakes are inevitable, and you can only grow stronger if you learn from them. And they're proof that you're trying. I'm forever making mistakes. I make mistakes in Spanish that I have a degree in. I make mistakes in English. I'm forever telling the children, I make mistakes in English. I've been speaking it since the day I was born. I am never going to know every word in that language, and I'm always going to make mistakes. And sometimes if you overthink it, you do make those mistakes. I remember some really good ones I made when I was first learning Spanish. I once insisted to my host family when I was 17, when I'd gone to Spain for 3 weeks to practice Spanish before my exams. I remember that the son of the family came in, and I'd been singing away to myself, and I went, oh, ahora estoy embarazada. No, I thought that meant, oh, now I'm really, really embarrassed. It actually means, oh no, now I'm pregnant, which caused no end of a kerfuffle. And I was insistent that this was the correct word. And I just made up, I'd thought of the most plausible word and I come up with it. Sometimes it doesn't work. You know, I had other stories from people's years abroad when I was at university of similar embarrassing situations where people had come out with things that they thought they were the correct word because they tried to choose a cognate and they chosen the wrong one. Or if you speak Spanish, around the word preservativo, around echar un polvo. You know, echar means to throw or to spread, and polvo is dust, but it also has another connotation that perhaps we don't want to go into. Simple as at university, my friend asked me, my Mexican friend asked me if I had any Durex. Well, to me, that's a condom. But to him, that's sellotape, which is perfectly innocent, but it did make my face kind of go, what? Why are you asking me for that? That's a bit strange. So what do we do with those mistakes? I'm learning German, and the cases in German do my head in, as the children would say at school. And if somebody picked me up every single time that I got the wrong case, I would be so demoralized. But it's finding that line between correcting so we can learn from our mistakes and not demoralizing the child. This is a piece of work that one of my year sixes came up with the other day. And I shared it on social media because I'd had a particularly trying day. This particular class had been noisy. They hadn't, this was their assessment. They hadn't actually shown me what they'd learned because they were far too excited, and it was noisy. It was the afternoon. And this child just made me want to go, yes. And then someone pointed out, oh, hang on, excuse me, in the last box, he's put un parque vieja. And that kind of made my heart sink a bit. And I thought, oh, but I was celebrating that work because he's managed to get the adjectives in the right place. He's made most of them agree. And yeah, I did miss that one out, and I will correct it for him. But we need to be thinking when we're correcting. I wanted him to have the message that I'm really pleased with him, and I will correct it, but I didn't want to correct every single mistake. Sometimes I don't correct every single mistake just so that we can focus on one thing. I want to focus on the fact he's got things in the right place. Occasionally we do slip up, but you know, it's a question we need to think about. Another question for you to think about: are we teaching children the words that they want and or need? There's a big debate about, do children really need to know about the content of their pencil cases? Well, actually, I teach younger children, and yes, they are absolutely fascinated with their pencil cases, and they want to know what things are. When we teach them colours, they're not content with the 9 colours I've chosen to teach them. They want to know how to say aquamarine and turquoise and multicoloured, and they want to know these things. So when we do pets, they are not content with dogs and cats anymore. Oh no, we need Komodo dragons and all kinds of exotic pets, because that is their experience. They want to know them. So we need to be able to, children want to communicate and they need to have those words. So just a question to throw out there: do we tell them the words that they really need to know? Another itchy feet comment, just for a little break there. In different countries, the idea of Joe Average, you know, we got Pinco Palino, Nowheresville. At the bottom it says in Spanish. I always thought El Quinto Pino was where I would say Nowheresville. It's like in the middle of nowhere. And I like When Pigs Fly, Le Semaine de Quatre Jeudi. I like that one a lot. Okay, using your words. It's not just words. It's not just words. And it's also, I lived in Switzerland for 2 years, and we lived in this German speaking part where they speak Schweizerdeutsch. And I tried really hard, but the thing I found hardest was being on the telephone. And I still find it hard speaking any language on the telephone, because you can't use your hands and you can't gesture. When you can't think of the word, quite often you can use your hands and kind of like on your body language to demonstrate what it is you're trying to communicate. And you've also got your face. I mean, I can't see your faces, but you can see mine. And you can see me as I'm speaking, and you can see how I'm feeling and what I'm trying to communicate with you. So my words are accompanied by gesture, they're accompanied by a context, a face, whereas on the telephone, you've got no idea. And if someone's struggling in a language, you don't know how they're feeling. You don't know if they're, madly gesturing like I usually am on the telephone to try and make yourself understood. And body language is a very powerful tool. We have body language before speech, and apparently 80% of what you understand is read through the body, not the words. So you can imagine on a telephone, really hard. When you can't see people, really hard to do that. In the classroom, I really love using gesture and using action to accompany the words that we're learning, to reinforce them, and also to give a prompt to help you remember. So using physical Spanish phonics and having an action to do. So for the children, if they're getting confused between I and E, all I have to do is go, that's I, this is E. And I'll go, oh, no, it's E, isn't it? Okay. On the right-hand side, we've got a picture there of Talk for Writing, which is an English strategy, excuse me, for storytelling. And that is a story map of the enormous turnip, El Nabo Gigante. And telling the story, we have actions. So if we go down to the third line down, so we would have el abuelo llama la abuela. Abuela. La abuela tira el abuelo. El abuelo tira el nabo enorme. Tiran, tiran, tiran. Pero el nabo enorme no mueve. So in order to help them tell the story, we have the actions. So actions are important. Last year we did the last 2 years, in fact, we've done a project that uses Makaton as a form of communicating. And the gesture supports understanding. This was an international project around the world. And because we were using gesture, and we were all using the same signs, it didn't matter what language we were speaking, we could understand what the other was saying. Okay, there's a link, there are links to all of this in the presentation, and I will write a post on my blog with the links in it as well. So if you're interested in looking, you can look there. Let's move on to connections. So research says that we are born with the neural pathways for any language in the world, but if those pathways aren't used, they kind of form dead ends when you're about 18 months old. So, I would encourage you to speak any language to your children when they're young, just to keep some of those pathways going. I really wish that I'd spoken more Spanish to my children and read them more stories in Spanish and German and French. It would have been Spanish and French then, just to keep some of those going. Now, they obviously have, and it proves that they do repair over time and you can get them back again. But if you've got those there, parents ask me, oh, well, I've got a parent at school who's Romanian. She says, well, should I speak to my children in Romanian? Well, yes. They might not answer you, but if they keep hearing those sounds, those connections will still be there. Okay. Words and languages are all interrelated, and those connections are important. This is a lovely graphic from Mina Sundberg in her Neb comic, Stand Still and Stay Silent. And this is a graphic of all the world language families, which I really, really love. And you can see how they're all related to each other. And I particularly liked this section where she's talking about the Nordic languages. And I'm not a great cat fan, but I just love this. If you look at how they're talking to each other. So the Icelandic one and the Danish and the Norwegian ones, and then you see Finnish. And the description of the Finnish says, not from the same language family as the other 4 Nordic languages, absolute gibberish. And the cat's looking a little bit nonplussed. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I think, but I just found that really, really interesting. And I love the way that different languages are related to each other. So that's something worth checking out. And again, we've got here the words in the different languages that you can compare. Are they similar? Some of them are. So the word for wind seems to be fairly similar until you get to Finnish. Just really interesting. And then looking at the beauty of words, I love some of these untranslatable ideas. So we've got Goya in Urdu, Sundoku in Japanese. I do that all the time, buying a book and leaving it unread piled together. Ubuntu, a lovely word. And one of my favourites, Valdainsamkeit, the feeling of being alone in the woods. Etymology is another thing that I really, really love. And I have this dictionary that I take to school sometimes, and we open it up and look at a word. I'm just looking at the time, and I don't think I've really got time, but let's just pick one. Let's just pick one from here. So let's have a look at, okay, the word evil. The word evil. Nowadays, evil is just about as bad as you can get, but it wasn't always that way. In the Middle Ages and going right back into Anglo-Saxon period, evil was just the standard word for anything ordinarily bad. It didn't begin to be replaced in the role by bad until about 500 years ago. And if we go still further back in time, evil gets even less bad. It seems to have been based originally on an ancient Germanic word, which is also the ancestor of English up and over. And so its first meaning was probably nothing worse than going beyond normal limits. So that's a lovely dictionary, especially for younger children, because they're quite short meanings. And then I'm just going to mention these wonderful challenges from Oxford University Press, which are downloadable. Just nice little challenges that get you looking at the origins of words. You can download them from their website, looking at how words are formed from people's names, how words come from Greek and Latin. It's all Greek and Latin to me. So which word is in the Greek word for the world? Is it planet, asteroid, comet, galaxy, or cosmos? It's the word cosmos. Which word comes from the Greek for milk? If you like chocolate, it's galaxy, and so on. And I find that kind of thing really interesting. And I know that although the children at school don't, well, actually 2 of them do have an understanding of Greek, so they're actually a secret weapon at this point. But trying to think of, okay, well, star-like, what word would we think would be to do with stars in there? How could we, a long-haired star? A long-haired star, well, a comet is a star with a tail, isn't it? So that would make sense. And making those connections and understanding where these words have come from. I know this was one of the things my youngest son, said was the most fascinating for him with language and why he loves it so much. It's just those little stories and those little tweaks. Really loves that. If you also like this kind of thing, the Something Rhymes with Purple podcast is for you. I love it. This week's one, which I haven't listened to yet, is all about the names in Italian for pasta, which actually links to a talk that I signed up for, which I think I've missed, which is rather unfortunate. It's all about language and food, but I'm going to catch up with it on the website, so that'll be great. I'm really looking forward to that. But this is a really good podcast in which Giles Brandreth and Susie Dent, if you watch Countdown, you'll know that Susie Dent sits in Dictionary Corner and has the meanings of all the different words. Really, really interesting from a linguistic point of view, finding out where words come from. This week, one I listened to that stuck in my mind was the word window comes from wind and alga, so a wind eye. So you can see that, which I thought was quite an interesting one. And the last one I listened to, they shared a really interesting word, which was poronkusima. I'm sorry if you are Finnish, if I pronounced it wrongly, but it's an old distance. It's about 7.5 kilometers, and it's measured by the amount of how far a reindeer can go without needing to go to the toilet, which again I found absolutely fascinating. It's one of those things you can just throw into conversation at a dinner party. It's like, oh, did you know? I like that kind of thing. Okay, and then My good friend Claire Seckham on Lightbulb Languages has made a whole year's worth of these language links, looking at the words in English and where it's come from. So we've got cut, coupe, from coupon, fashion, all those different languages, to model, map, and so on. And asking the children as well, this is an example of a worksheet that is from Lightbulb Languages, where you compare the days of the week. So you can ask questions like, okay, in English, we have the word day on the end of each of our days of the week. Could you tell me what the word in German for day is? Well, let's have a look. Oh, look, they all end with tag. And Norwegian, they end with dag. Well, could that be the word for day? Oh, but look at Welsh. They have the same word at the beginning. Could it be that that's the word for day, but it's at the beginning? Any other languages where it's at the beginning? Oh, look, Latin. And if you're really clever, oh, look at Catalan. I wonder if that means day. Again, making links with other languages and reinforcing that languages are all related to each other in some way or other. And then this is just another one I like to do. Any ideas what these words are to do with? I'm just going to click through them really quickly. You can use the clues. So you've got pinky in that second line there. You might have got it from rosas. You might have got that was the word for pink. Would you have got the word from orange from that first line with the word salmon? And so on. And then we've got the different languages that are spoken there. Trying to take it away from European languages and spreading it across the world, because although we live in Europe, languages are spoken all over the world. And I think that's really important that we bear that in mind. Oh, same slide again. Celebrating those languages. As I said, I teach in 2 schools, and the 2 schools are very different. One school, most of the children are English speaking as their first language, and the other school, most of the children are not English speaking as their first language. And over the time I've been teaching, 20 years, speaking another language has ceased to be something that people would hide. And now children that I teach want to share the languages that they speak, and they are proud of it. And that's something, as a language teacher, that I want to happen. I want children to feel good about the fact that they can speak other languages. I call it their superpower. And we celebrate this on, quite regularly at school. This was actually a poem that a child wrote about languages. There are so many languages, I can't count, there's so much. There's Spanish and Chinese, Japanese, African and Dutch. There are so many languages in this world, but very few of them have I been told. There's Spanish and French, I'm sure, and Dutch and Maori and many more. There are so many languages, each one is unique. There are so many languages about which we can all speak. That was written by a 10-year-old 2 or 3 years ago at my school. I was so pleased. When she read it out in our special assembly, I thought she found it in a book, but she said, no, I've written it myself. Look, here it is. And the one on the right is written by somebody else. But I really like that sentiment. I'm not going to read it to you now, but the idea that my friend has got 2 languages, she sings 2 songs, and I wonder if I'll ever find another voice. And that's what I want as a teacher, as an educator. I want the children to want to sing in other languages, to want to sing in another voice. Oops, sorry, I've skipped. We do have regular assemblies at school where we celebrate the languages we speak. So this little lad here speaks Bulgarian at home, but this little girl doesn't speak Spanish at home, but she wants to share the Spanish that she's learned. Japanese and Greek, they have connections with those countries. They want to share that connection. These children all speak other languages at home, and they want to share them. Oops, sorry, I clicked on a link. Let's go back to where we were. That's better. Okay, just last month, another child wrote a poem about languages for me. I want them to be proud, to show off their superpower and to share it. Talking about culture, we need to be careful about stereotypes. I've stopped having the European Day of Languages come as a person from another country, because I'm fed up of seeing people dressed like the little man there, as a French person wearing a beret with onions around their neck, because I've yet to meet a French person with a string of onions around their neck. I have met some wearing berets in the middle of the countryside, that's fine. I have seen ladies in Spain wearing flamenco dresses, but not on a day-to-day basis, and so on. So we need to be careful. We need to go beyond those stereotypes when we're talking about culture. I heard English has 64 words for coffee, and this is just like a word of warning. People say, oh, the Eskimos, they've got hundreds of words for snow. Well, yes, but they don't have hundreds of words for snow. And there's actually, I'll put a link in the post I write afterwards that explains that they don't have a million words for snow. They just need to be able to explain to people the conditions in which they're living. We have lots of words for snow. We've got a word for mushy snow. So we've got a word for, snow that's dirty. We've got a word for snow that's turned hard. It's ice. So, your context dictates what you need to be able to communicate. Language is part of our culture wheel. It goes with the arts, with food and drink, with our values, with our traditions and cultures. Language is the roadmap of a culture. It tells people where its people have come from and where they're going. And learning a language is not about learning words for the same things, but learning other ways to think about things. It's really, really important. Things like politeness. When I was on my year abroad in Spain, there were two ways that people could tell I wasn't Spanish. The first was I was never wearing a coat because I don't feel the cold as much as they do. And the second one was whenever I got off a bus or whenever someone gave me something in a restaurant, I would say gracias. Now, in this country, we say thank you for everything. I always say thank you when I get off a bus because that's the way it is done here. But it's the person's job to drive the bus. And in other cultures, it's like, if it's their job, why are you thanking them? So to me, that was odd because I'd grown up that you always say thank you, you always do this. But the amount of times I said thank you and please was disproportionate to the other people around me. And it's not that other cultures are impolite, it's they have a different way of showing their, of speaking and of showing their politeness. Okay, making links. Oh, I'm looking at the time. I'm going to run out of time in a minute. So again, we've got a slide there that says, a British person, if they say with the greatest respect, what you hear is I like and respect you, but what they're actually saying is you are an idiot. And actually I don't agree with what you're saying. Again, this is tongue in cheek. It is from a comic. If you're interested in this kind of thing, can I recommend the Future Learn course, Introduction to Intercultural Studies, which is starting again on the 23rd of November. It's really, really good. I really enjoyed it. Making links with other countries is really important. So children see that their way of thinking isn't necessarily the only way. Our way of celebrating Christmas is not the only way, and other countries don't celebrate Christmas. My school is currently involved heavily in e-twinning and has been for the last 12 years. But we're doing an Erasmus Plus project at the moment, all about culture and going cultural, in which we're working with Turkey, Austria, Spain and Greece, and learning about each other's cultures and celebrating it so that we can safeguard that culture for the future. We've written a hello song. I'm just going to skip over this. But even Peter Crouch in his podcast talks about languages and talks about accents. So it's in popular culture. And without getting political, our current situation in this country with Brexit coming, where do languages fit into that? For me, language is a form of action capable of influencing change. Their articulation represents a complete lived experience. I think language is really, really important because by our words we learn thoughts, and by thoughts we learn about life. Nelson Mandela, we've all heard that quotation before. If you talk to him in his language, it goes to his heart. So I'm going to leave my presentation there. I think I've got about 3 minutes left for questions. If you want to contact me, I am on Twitter @LisiBow. My website is lisibow.com, and I've just realised I haven't put my email there, but it's lisibow@me.com if you want to send me a message. But thank you for listening. I am now going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to see, oh, I've got lots of questions. Right, I'm going to go and have a little look at the questions, and we'll see what we've got. Okay, so someone agreed. Thank you, Joe, for your comment. Yeah, using gesture supports learning. It triggers different parts of the brain. I would agree with you that there, yeah. Can I have your blog name, please? Yes, my blog is called Vamonos, as in it came from Dora the Explorer when she said, "Hola, vamonos, everybody, let's go." But the website is lisibo, lisibo.com, C-O-M. Okay, what book is The Tree of Languages from? I missed it. It's from a Nebo comic, and I found it online. But the link I will put in the post on my website when I put this up. It's not on the top of here. It was actually from Mental Floss, but it's an article from 2014. Brilliant. And Jo again talking about home languages, and she has a special celebration for that. That's really, really great. Okay, getting copies of my slides. I will put the presentation up on my website. I'll share it on SlideShare. I just need to check first of all if there's any copyright and any children that I mustn't share. And obviously the video of this you can watch back later. Okay, but once you get the presentation, you should be able to click on the links in the presentation. Okay. Unless anybody else has got any more questions, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to have a little look at the chat before we all leave, but thank you very, very much for coming. I can see there's 99 things in the chat, so I'm going to have a read of that now, but thank you very much. Hasta luego, adios, auf Wiedersehen, tschüss, etc. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.